Hi, I was muted. So happy Tuesday. Okay. All right. So much for staying on time today. Great job, Kristen. I was on a roll too. Come on, guys.
Yay. All right.
Now we have sound. I literally just had Zoom. So I'm in Zoom on Facebook and Zoom was muted. So, okay. So let me recap. Today we're going to make a hearty minestrone soup out of this canned beef stew. So we often at the food bank distribute a ready-to-eat beef stew that comes in a pouch. And this is the most similar thing I could find at the grocery store. So this is store brand beef stew in the can, 20 ounces. The pouch that we distribute is 24 ounces, so it's very close in size. We're using this as our base of the recipe. And what I want you to think about is how many servings you get out of the one can versus how many servings of this whole dish you can get whenever you add some stuff to it. The canned beef stew is not the most healthy, but whenever you add other things, we're adding actually all of the food groups here except for dairy. We're going to extend how many servings we have. So the canned beef stew is like 2.5 servings. And then this whole soup that I'm going to make is 6 servings. So you can more than double the amount of people that you can serve with this dish. So before I went live, I went ahead and got my onions started cooking. So I'm going to go ahead and add some of the other ingredients. I should also add, while I was muted, that everything for this dish is shelf stable or frozen today. So we're going to talk about how to stock a staple pantry for those days where you don't have enough time to actually plan a meal, but you have stuff in your pantry that you can put together to actually make a full healthy meal. So I'm going to show you my pot over here, and I'm going to add some of the other ingredients and talk about them as I have it. Ready? Yeah. Okay, so here's my pot. I went ahead and got started with some chopped frozen onions. So this is a good idea if you see them at the grocery store and they're on, I have a really good deal. Like these were on the 10 for 10 marketing that Kroger does, not representing a grocery store today, but that's where I shopped. So I used frozen chopped onions. So my prep today before we got started was very minimal. So I went ahead and got my onions cooking. Actually turned this off while we were trying to figure out the sound. So these cook for about 5 minutes. Your frozen onions are going to cook basically the same way as fresh onions. You're going to get a little extra splatter at the beginning because they're cold and wet and your oil is hot. So just keep that in mind. Otherwise, they're going to cook the same. They still look the same. They don't look like they were frozen. So that's a huge time saver. So what I'm going to add to that is a 28-ounce can of crushed tomatoes. You can use any tomato product here. I like crushed tomatoes. You can use tomato sauce or the whole canned tomatoes, and you can just chop up the whole tomatoes into smaller pieces or diced tomatoes. You get it. You can use any of it. So I'm going to go ahead and add my tomatoes. There we go. So that would be 2 of the regular size cans of tomatoes. And this is the big can, so keep that in mind. So that is my tomatoes. I'm going to go ahead and add my canned beef stew. And then with that, I'm going to go ahead and add 2 cups of water and my pasta. But so what I wanted to show you is that I actually put my water inside of my tomato can so I could rinse it out and get all of the tomato goodness. You could also take this water and rinse out your beef stew can as well to get just all of the flavor in there. So this is my rinsed can with 2 cups of water. And then for right now that is it. Pasta goes in just a minute. Okay, cool. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna bring this up to a boil to get it hot, and then we will add the rest of our ingredients. And the cook time after that is just enough to make the pasta be your preference. So al dente is good. That's what I do. But you can cook it a little bit longer if you like it softer. It's totally up to you. Okay. So I'm just gonna put my lid on here and turn up the heat so it will come to a boil pretty quickly. Okay, so while that's going, I want to talk to you a little bit about how you can stock a staple pantry in your home. So this is whether you're going to a grocery store or going to a food pantry, these tips are really helpful. So what is the first thing that we do when we are not prepared to cook dinner for an evening and we are running late, everything's behind. So what do? We will most likely go through a drive-through, or we will have something like maybe a frozen prepared meal or something like that in the freezer that you can pop in the microwave or in the oven, and that would be dinner. So those aren't necessarily the healthiest options. So having a staple pantry will help you have something to fall back on whenever you're busy, but also it'll keep your pantry stocked, and that is super helpful. So a couple of things that you can do is when you say you're going to the grocery store and you have a shopping list already prepared. So pay attention to what's on sale. You may have already done that while you were putting your shopping list together. And if you can, while you're shopping in a grocery store, just add one of a couple of the items that you are already going to buy. So for one, you know that you will use that item and you can just have the second one available for the future. So it'll just be there for when you need it. And so also that's really helpful when there are extra deals. So I was talking about the 10 for 10 with my frozen onions. I bought 2 bags just to have a second one on hand. Same thing with my veggies. They were also on sale, so I grabbed 2 of those. So if you can do that when you're shopping and you've got a little bit of extra money for that, totally do that. Also, check out the herbs and spices section at the grocery store. Even if you're not looking for something specific, sometimes there's sales and you can get something that you don't have that is a good staple herb or spice to add to your pantry. There is also usually like a dollar section on the herbs and spices. So those are really helpful to just grab when you can. So you can also use these tips at a food pantry. So when we were able to shop in the food pantries using the client choice model, like a grocery store, you could use these tips as well. So even if you don't particularly need an extra bag of rice because you already have rice, it's good to maybe grab another one to have it on hand. The same thing goes for some of our key food groups that can be harder to come by sometimes than others. So think about your dairy products. If your food pantry has a shelf-stable boxed milk that doesn't have to be refrigerated until you open it, that's really helpful to grab because you never know if the fresh milk will be available at the pantry. The same thing goes for shelf-stable milk, also our shelf-stable meats. Not all pantries are going to have our frozen or fresh meat available. A lot of them do. Like we do have a nice good source of meat coming through the food bank, but it's not always the case for every smaller pantry. So keep in mind that you could grab an extra can of beef or an extra can of tuna or chicken and just have that on hand. That doesn't have to be your first choice. You don't have to use that as your first choice for cooking. But when you don't have the fresh available, which you may like that better, you will have a protein on hand that you can use. The style of cooking that I'm doing today is a one-pot meal. So we're doing everything in our one pot. So that's going to make it easier for you to clean up and to cook all in the same pot. But also a lot of these shelf-stable ingredients work really well inside of these one-pot dishes. So for instance, the canned chicken may not be the most appealing if you wanted to just eat the chicken like with some rice, but if you put it inside of a dish like this, it's perfect. It's very quick. you can drain off the liquid from the can, and you will have a little bit less salt product by getting rid of that liquid. And then once you're cooking, you want to think about where the rest of your salt came from before you add salt. So you can always add other seasonings, but you can't take salt away once you add it all. So cool. Let me check my pot. Okay, I can still touch that. All right. We're getting ready to boil here. So minestrone soup is an Italian inspired, well, traditionally it is Italian. This one is inspired. It is a really hearty, chunky vegetable soup. It doesn't necessarily have beef in it, but I am using the beef stew, and it works very well because a lot of the flavors go really well together. So in minestrone, there's typically pasta or rice, and there's usually some type of bean, and then there's a lot of veggies. So today I'm using a frozen mixed vegetables, and you can use also the canned mixed vegetables. So this would be 2 cans or one of the small, like 10-ounce bags of frozen veggies, 10 for 10. This is actually cheaper than the canned veggies, so that's why I'm using the frozen today. Our seasonings are Italian seasoning and garlic powder. So everything's shelf stable. You can use your fresh garlic if you want to do that, totally fine. For the sake of my example today, we're using our shelf stable. Italian seasoning is one of those staple seasonings that is really good to keep in your pantry. It has a combination of oregano and marjoram and thyme and rosemary, all the things that make a really delicious Italian combination. So that's a really good staple spice to have, as well as your garlic powder. Not garlic salt, because we can always add salt, we can't take it away. So start with a powder, and then if you need to add some salt, you can, but knowing that you're going into it with less salt is really helpful. Okay, so it's not fully boiling just yet, but that is fine. I'm gonna go ahead and add the rest of my ingredients. So I've got, the recipe calls for about 1/3 cup of dry pasta. I'm using a whole grain rotini today. You don't have to measure that exactly. Like, this little bowl's fine. You can just take your box and just pour a little in there. This recipe is more vegetable than pasta. The pasta is just an extra food group for one, and it helps bulk it up. So you don't have to measure that exactly. So that's our whole grain pasta. I'm gonna add my dark red kidney beans. You can use any type of beans in this. A light colored bean, like a cannellini bean, would be really nice. A lot of times minestrone does have like a dark colored bean, so that's why I chose the dark red kidney beans. I drained and rinsed the canned beans under cold water until the water was clear. This helps reduce the salt, and it also helps reduce the gas that you might get from beans. Because the liquid that the beans are canned in kind of pulls out some of the carbohydrate that makes you gassy. I'm not saying that it's all going to be gone, because fiber. With that, whenever you do increase your fiber content in your diet, you have to increase your water. That's where a lot of the gas can come from, is if you're not drinking enough water. And I will stop talking about that now. Okay, and then last but not least, our frozen veggies. I had thawed these out ahead of time so they wouldn't bring down the temperature of my pot too much. You can throw them in frozen, put it on high, make sure you check it periodically and make sure it's good, and just bring it up to a boil. All right, so this is basically the soup. Oops, here we go. Seasoning, very important. Garlic powder and Italian seasoning. There we go. Let me get that all stirred in there. And this, I mean, this honestly, if you got home from your really busy day, put your pot on the stove, let it get hot, grab your onions from the freezer, put them in the pot, and then go ahead and prep the rest of your canned ingredients while your onions are starting to cook. That way you're doing it all at the same time. You're not sitting around waiting for anything. And you can have this on the table in honestly like 20 minutes. As long as it depends on how fast your pot will boil. That's kind of your limiting factor here. Okay, so this is my soup. Those green peas look actually really great in this dish. The frozen ones. It looks really nice. Okay, so we're gonna bring this back up. Bring it to a boil. So the current factor is the pasta that we need to consider for the rest of the cook time. So different types of pasta might have different cook times. This one in particular is whole grain, so it just takes a couple minutes longer. So we're looking at 10 minutes for al dente, and then the whole dish will be done. If you wanted to cook this in a slow cooker, you could totally do that. I would recommend for you to add the pasta a little closer to the end of cook time so it does not turn to mush. This is mostly a heat through and it's done dish. There's not a ton of from scratch cooking. Everything is partially prepared. So the slow cooker won't take that long. You could put it on high and it'll probably take a couple of hours, but that's still very hands-off. That's for you to do that. So as you can see, and my pot is starting to boil very quickly because I put it on high. Okay, there we go. Make sure we're good there. Awesome. Okay, so some other things that I want to share with you. We talked about adding a thing here and there at the grocery store when you can to use for the future. It doesn't, just make sure it's something that you like and you know that you will use. You don't want to sit on something for a while and it just be in there, or waste your money on something you're not familiar with. So make sure it's something that you will use. Another thing I'd like to add is that you can take a look at the fresh produce section at the grocery store and see what is extra on sale. Sometimes there's a discount shelf where the produce that looks like it might be bad in the next day or so, and sometimes it's like $1 for a whole bag of onions or bell peppers. Sometimes they put bananas there, you get it. So take a look at that shelf every time you go to the grocery store. There might be something that you can buy, even if you don't use it that week. You can prepare it and put it in the freezer and have it ready for when you need it. So that's a good example for onions. Let me turn this down. So with onions, you can buy fresh onions, and when you have a little extra time, you can just chop them up and put them in the freezer and have them ready to go for when you need it. So like this, I didn't have to chop anything for this dish. The onions tell you to take them straight out of the freezer and put them in the pot. So that's even easier. So keep that in mind. I always look at that section of the grocery store because I'm looking for bell peppers. The green ones are always really cheap, but then red, orange, and yellow, they can be kind of pricey. I don't understand why they're so much more pricey. They're the same pepper. So I like to look for those, and then I will take them home. If I don't use them in the next 1 or 2 days, I will chop them up and put them in the freezer. So that's super convenient and time saving on days when you don't have a lot of time. Let's see. Do we have any questions, Joy? Cool. So let me ask you all, I'm curious to know if you all try to keep a staple pantry. Like, what's your pantry look like? What do you think about when you go to the grocery store? Are you thinking like 1 week at 1 or 2 weeks at a time? Or are you thinking ahead? What are your thoughts on this? I'm curious. This looks really tasty. I think I can actually see some comments here on my side. There's my pointer. There we are.
I can say that I usually use.
Yes.
Rice and pasta and beans are always in my pantry.
Rice, pasta, and beans. I'm the same way with beans. I will always grab a can of beans when I'm shopping, even if I don't need it. Especially during COVID, I would definitely stock up on beans and lentils and stuff like that, because you don't have to worry about thawing out meat from your freezer, and they will last a long time. So it will like decrease the amount of times you have to go to the store.
We've got some more comments here. Alpina says, what are some other pantry soup formulas and suggestions? I assume any kind of chili?
Yes, so definitely chili. Definitely chili. I have a couple of extra recipes that I shared in our episode 10 folder in the link that's in the caption. Another really good recipe that I was debating on making this, or I was thinking about making our quick Brunswick stew recipe. And that is the only thing fresh in there's fresh onion and fresh celery, but you can buy chopped onion and celery together. So that's a good way to do that, or freeze your own onion and celery. So our Brunswick stew uses canned chicken and canned mixed vegetables and some other really common things that you might have in your pantry. Any chili would be great. You can load down your chili with beans, or you can add quinoa to it for extra protein, or like brown rice. I know that there are some states that like to serve their chili over brown rice, or well, not necessarily brown rice, but rice. I recommend brown rice. So chili is always a good one. Any vegetable soup would be a good foundation. So as I was preparing this, I was thinking about what other ready-to-eat meals can you use, like you use this fully prepared beef stew for this dish. So you could use chicken noodle soup as a base, because chicken noodle soup is concentrated anyway. On the can, it tells you to add a can of water to your soup. So you could use that in place of a chicken stock if you didn't have a chicken stock. And when you add the water to it, it dilutes the salt, and then you spread the salt over more servings than it was meant for. So that's what I'm trying to share, is these things that you would never consider to be the best, especially canned soups. Those are going to have a lot more sodium than we would recommend, or that a lot of people really need. You can use those and stretch them out across more servings, and that makes it more healthy.
We've got some more comments coming in. Lindy says that she tends to shop for about 3 to 4 days at a time. And she's the same about beans and loves cannellini beans and garbanzo beans.
Yes. Another dish that came to mind, one of our food bank recipes that you can make with pantry staples, is our salmon burgers recipe. Because Lindy, you actually reminded me of that. So our salmon burger is canned salmon. It has dried oats, so that's a good pantry staple. And it has some onion, so you could use your frozen onion there if you wanted to. And it has a can of cannellini beans, or any beans. So the beans are mashed, and then you add everything else into it to make a healthier salmon patty, or croquette, if you will. So that's actually a really good pantry staple recipe. Thank you, Lindy.
Lindy says, I love that recipe.
It's such a good recipe. It turns out really well.
Another comment from Veronica. She says, I always keep some canned or shelf-stable items in my pantry. There's always green beans, corn, chickpeas, canned tomatoes, and rice available.
Yes. I love it. Tomatoes, that's another really good staple. Any tomato product. If you're at the pantry or at the grocery store, you can just pick up an extra can of diced tomatoes, and you can just use that in anything. Or if, say, an actual prepared jar of spaghetti sauce is not in your budget for this particular week, or you're at the pantry and they don't have prepared spaghetti sauce, you can use canned tomato sauce, or our canned crushed tomatoes that I used for this dish. This is this is a staple in my house, the crushed tomatoes. You can turn this into a spaghetti sauce by adding your Italian seasoning, staple herb, and then whatever else you like in your spaghetti. Some frozen veggies would be good. So that's another thing that I always have is any version of tomato. Let's see. You can also do this with ramen. So the really cheap ramen packets that you can find at the grocery store, pantries often have them. Ramen has more salt than you need in one day in one of those seasoning packets. So you could add more liquid and dilute the salt, or you can use half of the packet and still add more liquid. And you can bulk it up with other ingredients. You could add some veggies. You can add that canned chicken would go really good in a ramen dish. So that's another ingredient that you can stretch that's basically prepared and ready for you to go to make it healthy.
Oh, we have another comment, Kristen.
Yeah.
With the holidays coming up and pumpkin being something pantries will probably have an abundance of, can you share some recipes with cans of pumpkins?
Oh, can I? That's what. So we love working with canned pumpkin here because after the holidays, we get all the donated pumpkin of what was not bought because people definitely go crazy for the canned pumpkin. So funny that you asked that because my next episode in 2 weeks is going to be all about canned pumpkin. So I can give you a little insight on some of the recipes that they have. I haven't chosen which one I'm going to make yet, but we have a pumpkin chili. We have a pumpkin pasta sauce. That's delicious. And we also have a tomato soup recipe that is made with pumpkin. So it tastes exactly like canned condensed tomato soup, but it is used with the canned pumpkin, and like you would never know. You would never know that was pumpkin.
I tried it on my boyfriend a couple of weeks ago.
You did?
Yeah, he saw me. I was really excited. He saw me putting in the pumpkin ahead of time, but I don't think he would have known otherwise.
So yeah, thanks, Sonia. We're definitely going to be showing you guys some pumpkin recipes. We also have like a pumpkin pancake recipe and a pumpkin muffin recipe, but that uses the canned pumpkin filling that has all of the pumpkin pie seasonings and some sugar added to it. The other recipes that I mentioned, the savory ones, all use just the plain pumpkin puree. So if you got some extra of the filling, the pie filling, you can, I'll share those other recipes, but 2 weeks, definitely going to share that with you. Can you guys see this? It looks so good. It's so hearty and filling. You got all of your food groups here except for dairy, which is not a problem at all. Yeah, okay, awesome. Where's my scoop? There we go. Okay. So the last thing that you can add at this point, at the very end, would be pepper to taste. To me, my personal taste preference, it doesn't need any extra salt, and nutritionally, it doesn't need any extra salt added to it because we've got salt from all of the other ingredients that we added. We can drain and rinse our canned vegetables, but they're still going to give us some salt. And our beef stew already had some salt. So that got stretched out and it fits our nutrition needs. So taste it before you add any salt, please. Okay. I'm just going to give it like a really nice heavy bit of pepper here because that really brings it all together. And then I'm going to serve this up. All right, so our serving size for this is 1.5 cups. So that's technically 3 ladles, which sounds like a lot, but it's a really hearty soup and it goes a long way. I mean, 2 scoops is plenty. You want a bowl, Joy?
Yes, please.
Do you want 2 scoops?
I'll take 2 scoops.
Okay.
Thank you.
So there's some of the beef that came from our beef stew. It actually reminded me of the beef from the chunky soup. That is the like beef sirloin one. That was the like flavor and texture of the beef from the can. There you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you like a spoon?
Yeah. All right, let me Cool. Okay, let me turn this off. That is done. This is our final product. You can top this with a little Parmesan cheese. You can eat a nice little side salad to get an extra boost of veggies on the side. But otherwise, this is a complete meal with all of your food groups represented. Actually, there's no fruit, but if you really want to be particular, you can call your tomatoes fruit. Okay, well, that is what I have to share with you today. I hope you enjoyed it. Please take a look at the resource folder that is linked in the caption. I'm going to download the video after we finish, and I'm going to upload it there so you can go back to it or see any of our past videos and the recipes and handouts and things that I have available for all those topics. If you will please come back in 2 weeks and hang out with us, we're going to talk all about pumpkin puree and maybe even show you how to make some pumpkin puree. I have heard, I've seen a lot of people having a hard time actually finding pumpkin puree. And I think it's just the season for that. So you may be seeing some actual pumpkin puree making. Not a promise, but I do have a handout that I will share with you to do that. So thanks for watching, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Joy just dropped the link to the resource folder in the chat box, so take a look at that.
Oops, the first one is wrong. But I'm gonna
oh, yes, not the, look for the bit.ly link. Okay, thanks everyone. We'll see you later.
I haven't done it yet.
You can